welcome to Shop Talk. This is our last and most fantastic Shop Talk of the day. James Gordon-MacIntosh is a founder and partner of the PR agency Hope and Glory. He has spent the last 17 years doing what he refers to as silly things to make his consumer clients famous, and they are. Hamleys, O2, IKEA and Adidas are not just brand leaders, they are icons in their field. Last year, the agency garnered 49 industry awards. Here to show how a little lateral thinking goes a long way is James Gordon-MacIntosh. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you very much. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you, first of all, very much indeed, for pottering along to hear me speak. As Calypso said, I've run an agency for the last 4.5 years. I work on some very big brands. It's all very exciting. But ultimately what I do comes down to this, which is having fun and influencing people. Some of this stuff I hope will provide you with inspiration. It's from some very big brands in some cases, some of whom have enormous sums of money, which I appreciate not all of us do, although we may dream of having it one day. But hopefully it'll give you some food for thought. That said, though, I was just going to start with some absolute basics that might help you if you're contemplating undertaking your own PR or speaking to an agency, or you just want to know a little bit more about how PR works, take those first iterative steps. So, what is PR anyway is always a good place to start, I think. And some far cleverer and slightly more amusing people than I drew this simple diagram, which is that in essence, marketing is telling somebody that you're a great lover. Advertising is telling them you're a great lover time and time and time again until hopefully they believe you and take you up on your proposition of love. PR, on the other hand, is where someone who you know and who you trust tells you that I am a great lover, therefore engendering a greater degree of trust and perhaps the vague notion that he or she may be experienced in my loving and that therefore you are more likely to believe them. So, if you are contemplating undertaking your own PR, or indeed you just want to know some basic steps, the first thing I would always recommend is work out very, very clearly who it is that you want to reach. Time and time again, there are businesses out there that say, we want to promote our product, or we want to promote our service, our website, our retail, without actually thinking about who the people are who come into the store, who buy their products, who they speak to on a day-to-day basis. And there are a variety of them. And they all consume very different media in very different ways. They may be very interested in you for very different reasons. So identify your group, whether that is mums as perhaps purse holders of the supermarket shop. They are the people who make the decisions. If you're an FMCG brand, for example, they are the people who first and foremost you really want to communicate with. Do you want to reach a youth audience? In which case you're going to have to start thinking about which media and which channels you're going to use to do so. And even further, do you want to reach, for example, girls 18-24, men aged 35 to 54, because you're going to use your PR in very different ways depending on which audience it is that you want to get to. Second of all, what do you actually want to say? And again, there are lots of businesses out there fighting for media space. There is only so much editorial in the world. Journalists have only so much time to listen to you and to what you've got to tell them. So be very, very clear about what it is that makes you special and that your audience is genuinely going to care about and respond to. That could be, for example, that you are the most beautifully crafted product. It could be that you have a wonderful personal story to tell about how you have started your business or the products that you're creating. It could be that you are uniquely expert and experienced in the field in which you undertake, if, for example, you provide a service. It could be that you are genuinely unique and different, that there is nothing else on the world quite like the items or the service that you have. It could be, of course, that you're simply remarkably cheap. It's not a sustained message over time, but Lidl, for example, and Aldi have done perfectly well simply by explaining that they are much, much cheaper than anybody else on the market. It could be, for example, that you are local, that you're friendly, and that you're going to provide a unique and personalized service. Whichever of those, and there could be multitudes of others, that you feel most firmly personifies you, your approach, the product and service that you deliver, identify it and tell that story relentlessly. Next up, how are you going to reach these people in order to tell them what you want to tell them about yourself? There is obviously traditional news media, the national papers, for example. There's the lifestyle media. You probably consume this very much on your own, or you might reach them through online titles. Increasingly, the kind of main way that people consume their news, but likewise their product reviews, their product information, and of course beneficial insofar as many of them will provide a link straight through to your website, for example, so that they can come straight through to you and buy your product or your service there and then. Or increasingly, of course, through social networks and increasingly influencers. I'm always minded of the story of the spiralizer, which achieved fame and fortune, not particularly because anybody wrote about it initially, but because Deliciously Ella promoted it fairly relentlessly. And as someone with a vast following, it kind of caught the imagination, and the whole story rolled beautifully on from there. So think about the people who you turn to for information, for advice, for insight into your category, and think about how you might persuade them to use your product or to promote your service on your behalf. And then finally, how are you actually going to reach them? I would always advise, first and foremost, think about the media that your audience consumes rather than the media that you consume personally. All too often, I think clients will say, well, I really want to be in the Financial Times. And you kind of say, well, do you really think that your audience of 18 to 34-year-old, largely females, interested in fashion, are reading the Financial Times, or is it because you want to be in the Financial Times? And all too often that personal piece clouds judgment when it comes to thinking about the world through the eyes of your end audience rather than perhaps through yourself. But then likewise, take those media and pull them apart. If you pull out any newspaper, for example, and I would encourage you to do so, then you'll find that they are split beautifully in different sections which have very different agendas. Whether there's news, whether there's the features sections, whether there are profile slots, whether it's business pages or indeed startup media, and then of course there are the product pages, the shopping pages, which put together on generally a weekly or a monthly basis. Consume those pages relentlessly. If you want to be in them, ask yourself two things. First and foremost, who are the people writing these pages? What are their names? What are their email addresses? Generally speaking, you can find their phone number for the newspaper, the magazine online pretty straightforwardly and put in a quick call to find out. But then second of all, look at those pages and think to yourself, if I took one product out of this page, for example, could I see mine sitting in it? And sitting in it just as comfortably and for exactly the same reasons. And if the answer is yes, then of course, go out there and pitch your product or yourself, indeed, to that journalist. And then finally, consume these titles voraciously. And I think all too often that there are people who perhaps want to do PR and about whom journalists will say, well, I keep getting these calls from these people and I wonder whether they've ever read my stories, seen my page, actually looked really closely at what it is that I do on an ongoing and consistent basis and genuinely thought about how that they fit into that context and fit into my agenda as a journalist. So I would say, first of all, look at what they write about and fit your story to their agenda. Generally speaking, journalists write for a very specific reason, for a very specific audience. They're not going to change that just because you've got an interesting angle necessarily. Second of all, look at who writes what. Get in touch. Be direct, be personable, be polite. Always ask, have you got time to speak? Generally speaking, if you call at the right time of day, they will find time for you. But don't, whatever you do, go scattergun and send stuff out into the great wide ether. Generally speaking, journalists will ignore it. Some of them get 2, 3, 4, 500 pitches a day. So those that are going out to the world and its wife will generally be ignored very quickly. And finally, think about the deadlines. Generally speaking, news writers will write about stuff that's on the day. They might have been told about it a couple of days before. Features, on the other hand, might be working weeks out. If, for example, you wanted to be in the Christmas editions of Good Housekeeping, you would speak to them in June, because that's when they put their papers together. And there's a whole bunch of journalists out there who live on some really weird timelines because they're 2 or 3 seasons ahead of the real world. But you really should be cognizant of where they are in the grand scheme of things. And again, I would encourage you to understand what they do, understand what they're looking for, pick up the phone, but be aware of those deadlines. And some words of caution. I always think that people go into PR with great expectations of immediate fame. and that their product will be on every page, in every glossy magazine, in every weekly and in every monthly, just because they've sent out some emails and made some phone calls. The truth is that this takes time. It takes an enormous amount of patience. You're not going to be everywhere overnight, but that actually 2, 3, 4 great pieces can have a really significant impact on your business and start to drive interest. But that also some pieces in the right places will drive interest from others, because journalists are consumers as well. They consume the competitive media. They're interested in what other people are doing. And building relationships is vital. It could be that you speak to someone who says, yes, send me an email, and who 3 months down the line finally returns the email that you sent them and said, yeah, could you send over some images? I'm doing something and I think that this would fit in perfectly. So take that time and be patient and be relentless without badgering anyone. By trade, I'm generally a newsman. I kind of like news. I like generating news. I'm making up news for brands. And from time to time, I contemplate what makes a great headline. I once spent a happy evening with a news editor at The Sun, saying, what would be the dream tabloid headline? Absolute dream. And he'd really thought about it. And his dream headline was that a transsexual bishop had resuscitated Prince Charles's £1 million polo pony. Believe it or not, this is instructive for anyone who is interested in the way that the great British media works, because it has sex, it has religion, it has health, it has celebrity or royalty, it has money, it's sport or animals. And I challenge you, of course there will be exceptions to this, to pick up a newspaper and find stories that don't have at least one of those elements. And so where you are thinking about how, for example, you want to make news, but likewise how you want to pitch a product, think about the agenda of the journalist who's writing. I'm taking a tabloid writer from The Sun, but every journalist will have a similar agenda. And do you know what? On some of the papers, it might be, it's Gold Week this week. We're looking for original products with gold on them. But actually just taking that time to work out what is in a journalist's mind at the point at which you phone them and trying to work out how your story can fit with their agenda is pretty fundamental. And that's kind of an instructive lesson in it, I guess. And then, as Calypso said, I've made a profession of thinking laterally on behalf of my clients. Some of these, I will confess, are massive brands spending a lot of money, but hopefully they might give you some food for thought. And I'm going to fly through them at dramatic and rapid pace because I've been told that I have slightly less time than perhaps I thought. So, jumping the news agenda, really simple stuff, right? Balotelli, for example, Move Football Club. Cunning betting firm decided that because his performance was quite so poor, they'd do a shirt swap. You could take your Balotelli shirt back, you could receive one from the striker of the moment. Justin Bieber, for example, late for his gig at the O2, an enterprising taxi firm decided to brand up a cab incredibly swiftly and at relatively low cost and call it Taxi for Bieber, ensuring that he could get to all future gigs and that he would have altogether fewer pissed off fans. Being one step ahead, Wayne Rooney, as you know, became the most capped England footballer of all time. An enterprising, again, betting firm, simply got some photography, a cunning graphic designer who did a spot of Photoshop for them very swiftly, and transposed him as an English hero onto a variety of famous portraits. Make something to solve a problem. One of my favourites, Charlie Bingham's Pies, you might be familiar with the brand, created the world's most expensive ever ready meal. Featuring lobster, caviar, champagne, gold leaf, I believe, and a variety of other things. What's another good example? Sleeping pillows. Pillowcases with photographs of your loved ones on them so that if you are a business traveller, you can take them on holiday and be reminded of them, whichever the hotel room you happen to be in. Why? Because it's a little consumer insight. Business travellers, as you guys might know, if you're staying in hotels over the few days of this conference, tend to miss their kids. Quick insight, off you go. And I think that probably cost about 10 quid at Snappy Snaps. The right picture tells 1,000 words. These were some photos. Actually, this is one of mine. We work for the Royal Mint. They make coins. They created some beautiful coins that bore the image of landmarks. We simply took them out, lined up a photograph, and that was a double-page spread in the Metro. You can think creatively and cheaply about these things if you put your mind to it. Sometimes, though, you need to think epic. This was Lynx, which created every boy's fantasy, I suspect. The world's largest ever shower, as you can see, appealing to the tabloid vote. But if you can't be big, then perhaps think about being surprising. This is one of my all-time favourites, actually. It's from a retailer in Sweden, I think, at the time. They swapped their mannequins out, and they put size 16 mannequins out instead of having the standard ones. The story went absolutely global, and it positioned the brand really beautifully at the time. Hyundai went to a safari park, jumped out of their car and legged it because they wanted to demonstrate that it was family friendly, simply on the basis that if that bunch of monkeys couldn't have too dramatic effect on it, then a bunch of 7-year-olds probably aren't going to have quite as much impact by the end of the process. Again, super simple, super cheap, but a creative way of showing something that is true to the brand. Thinking laterally, another one from the retail space. Sainsbury's wasn't selling enough Pollock. They rebranded it Colin. Still don't really know why, but it went absolutely mental. Clashing cultures is always enormous fun. This is some work for IKEA reproducing meal times depicted in masterpiece paintings, but using IKEA products. Again, a relatively simple and cost-effective idea. Weird advertising. Generally, people go, ugh, whenever I show this. But Foster's found men with particularly hairy backs and paid them to have them waxed in the shape of the Foster's logo. Google decided that they would advertise with entirely blank billboards. And Sony, I think, for their 4K TVs, ultra-high definition, created micro-advertising on the bottom of a footballer's boots because with 4K TV you would be able to spot even the smallest ad. Buddying up with people, a great favourite, the National Trust partnering up with the Beano to create a specific edition. But likewise, this was Sony again, actually, taking their action cams, putting them back on the back of an eagle and then flying them from various landmarks. Actually working with a charity that was doing this anyway, and who took £5,000 simply to promote the camera. Share others' credibility. This was a song created by Marconi Union for Radox, the spa brand. They created the most relaxing song in the world, scientifically proven, apparently. Talent. From time to time, you may or may not have the opportunity to use a celebrity, but from time to time, when that happens, make them intrinsic to the story and not simply a badging exercise, unless, of course, you've got some mates who know someone, in which case I would always say, ask. Boffins can make a story. I think this is actually IKEA in this instance, and they came up with the kitchen of the future. Bunch of scientists sitting in a room. They probably did it themselves, to be perfectly honest with you, speculating over where the future of the kitchen might go. They knocked up a quick bit of graphics, which you can buy from a graphic designer for, what, 100, 150 quid. It's a couple of hours' work. Put the story out and got some great coverage as a result. Deliberately causing controversy. This is another absolute classic in the PR pantheon. Chessington decided to ban animal print. You could no longer wear your leopard skin or indeed your tiger skin jacket because apparently it scared the animals. Really super simple story. Whether they ever did it or not, whoever knows, but it still got national headlines. Solving real-world problems. In this instance, 118 in their heyday, simply putting a bunch of foam wrappers around lampposts to stop people looking at their phones and walking into them. Likewise, Confused.com came up with this idea. They found the most accident-prone street in Britain, and they covered it in bubble wrap. Not one of the cheapest ideas in this little selection, I will grant you. Sponsoring the unusual, I don't think I probably need to put any narrative around that. It's fairly obvious. But this one was Lynx. They sponsored the pandas at Edinburgh Zoo while they were trying to get together. The theory was that for Lynx Attract, they might be able to make things happen for the endangered species. As it transpired, the pandas failed to deliver. Lynx, however, was long gone by the time that occurred. Creating an experience, Hendrix, completely bizarre. They came up with umbrellas as a theme for their campaign, Hendrix Gin, based on a real insight. Which was that in Victorian eras, the cocktail umbrella was invented so that people could put it over their drinks and avoid having perfume sprayed into it as they were getting ready for an evening out, and so they created an entirely umbrella-themed experience. Calculating a cost or two. You will no doubt have read horrendous stories that it costs £210,000 to bring up a child. Those stories, I'm afraid to tell you, are concocted in PR agencies by people like me doing slightly iffy fag packet research and putting those stories out on a weekly or indeed an annual basis. So from time to time, just thinking about how you can come up with one of those stories and get money or houses into your headline. Never a bad idea. If you can be first, be first. This was a Facebook-driven beard growth billboard. And that was Budweiser, which created the first Facebook-streamed football match. Think about showing product features in innovative ways. This is another Sony. It's actually one of mine, I confess. Camera with an amazing zoom. We found some Where's Wally pictures and put them in the middle of a lake, and then pointed out that you could only see it with the wonderful zoom on the Sony camera. Again, a silly idea, but just an interesting way of thinking about getting a message across, which is quite functional quite often. And finally, looking inside for inspiration, and this is IKEA. That, if anyone's interested, is my daughter. But we discovered that they were bringing out a range of doll's house furniture that were iconic versions of, for example, the Billy bookcase. And we simply did some quick and dirty photography. Off it went, and the media went slightly nuts. And that's kind of it from me. I hope that that has given you a bit of a sense of where to start at the very beginning, and a bit of inspiration for where you might end up one day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. What questions have we got from the floor?
If any. Hello.
Questions?
Cool.
Oh, yes. Oh.
A very quick flash. You showed that the cost of bringing up a child,
yeah,
and that concept. What's it designed typically to achieve? To put people off having children, to make them... Do you know what I mean?
No, it's a very good question. So in this instance, here we are, £222,000. This one's Liverpool, Victoria. And they do a very good line. I've got to be a little bit careful. They were a client back in the day. They do a very good line in child trust funds. And so when that story went out, it was basically to try and encourage people to save, and obviously to try and get them to save with Liverpool Victoria, because the truth is that that sum of money is unlikely to put anyone off having a child, but at the same time what they could do was get across some of their messages about how important it is to save money and to put that aside, and also to talk about things like investing for the future, university costs, and so on and so forth.
Yes, there wasn't time when it flashed up to read what was related to it.
Absolutely, totally understand that. Totally understand that. But, you know, quite often what brands will do is they will find a problem and they'll highlight that problem. So, for example, the cost of a child, or indeed how much it costs to own a car, which I think was an RAC number, and they'll put up that problem in order that when you read the story, surprise, surprise, they've got the solution. And it's a classic kind of PR technique of problem solution.
Well, thank you very much, James, and please do continue the conversation on Twitter, #ShopTalk and @Inditute. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Rob, I was just going to say I'm sort of loitering about for another half hour or so. So I'll probably be standing over by that sound desk. If anyone wants to amble over and ask any questions, whether they're very straightforward or incredibly complicated, so do feel free. Thank you.